without further ado, let me introduce you to our panelists. First up, we have Qingyang Chen. She's from the class of 2015 and is the founder of QCVisuals. She's a biomedical illustrations. She has a biomedical illustrations studio established in 2013 and is an award-winning medical illustrator and designer with an international and comprehensive portfolio of data visualization, advertising, patient education, research publication, graphics, brand design, as well as animation. So please welcome Qingyang and thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you guys for having me.
Next, we have Judy Rubin. She's from the class of 2017. She is an award-winning and highly prolific client-facing medical illustrator. She has a vast portfolio of scientific publications, marketing and advertising, sales training, physician education, and legal and forensic use. Her clients include pharma, medical device, law firms, hospitals, academic researchers, and universities. So thanks, Judy, for joining us and welcome to the panel.
Thank you so much. So great to be here today.
Third up, we have Sarah Crawley. She's from the class of 2018. She is a freelance illustrator and animator, curious about all the ways we can visualize and understand the world. She works primarily in developing visuals for research publications and patient education. And a particular passion of hers is animation, and it often leads to her exploring different techniques, exploring ways to play with style, and you can see that throughout all her projects. So welcome and thanks for joining.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Last but not least, please welcome Avesta Rastan. She's from the class of 2019. She's a freelancer whose career started shortly after publishing her viral, no pun intended, COVID-19 infographic that was shared by the World Economic Forum, published in Discover magazine. And her other works have also been published in other high impact journals such as Nature, Cell, JAMA. And she primarily works with researchers in academia, med tech startups, and various agencies. So thank you for joining us, Avesta.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here.
All right, so before we start, just a quick reminder to all our attendees that you can start typing in your questions at any point in time. Please do so in the Q&A chat. And for our panelists, I might direct questions to a specific one or two of you, but that's just an effort of keeping this conversation flowing between everyone. If you feel the urge to jump in to tag on an answer to someone else's, please feel free to do so. So to kick it off, I'm going to start with a question from us, the team, and that is just an introductory one. And it is, how long have you been freelancing? And what led you down this path of freelancing? So let's start maybe at the top of the list, starting with you, Qingyang.
Hi, also amazing that you're pronouncing my name correctly. I normally have to correct people.
I was a little worried, to be honest.
No, you did a great job. How long have I been freelancing? I think I define freelancing as getting kind of like your first paid client. So I started freelancing before BMC during undergrad. I did a bunch of drawings for some children education books. And to be honest, I started freelancing because I was a student and I needed money because I got bills to pay and student loans to pay. And then I just kind of never stopped since then.
Awesome. How about you, Judy?
So I also fell into freelancing in undergrad as well. I had a marine biology professor and I learned he was writing a book on visual ecology, and I just asked him if he needed any illustrations, and that's really where it started. And so today, you know, when the opportunity comes up with my full-time job or in between jobs as well, I still love to freelance.
And Sarah?
Yeah, in undergrad, I worked a lot with student publications, so I was sort of used to that flow of producing illustrations. And then it was kind of accidental as I was talking with companies and trying to find a job or just explore job options, and kind of fell into it as a there are pros and cons, but a sort of accidental solution to finding work.
And finally, Avesta, how about you?
Yeah, so I actually never thought I would be a freelancer. And I think what really happened that made me go down this path was the pandemic itself. And it's kind of this whole other story. But basically, when the situation changed, and it made me realize things that I hadn't realized in the past, and I decided that freelance kind of best fit my current, career goals and trajectory. So I decided to leave industry and go the freelance path. And that was back in May this year. So I'm a pretty new freelancer.
Gotcha. So it sounds like we all have different reasons for having started, some out of necessity, others just having fallen into it, either through circumstance or just going with the flow. I was wondering, would you guys have another way? Would you prefer having worked in studios if it weren't for circumstances, for example? Maybe let's change it up, and I'll throw this to Judy first.
I think even though I sort of fell into it, I definitely knew that I was headed toward a career in medical illustration, and so I was out looking for it anyways. So I think that a lot of us are just highly motivated individuals, and we kind of are always looking for opportunity. So I think I probably would have found it anyways in some shape or form.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll jump in quick. I definitely, since my focus is animation, I've always really wanted to have that studio experience. And I've gotten that opportunity with a few contract roles, but that's definitely something I kind of grapple with in my ideas about my own career path.
Right, so I guess still sort of exploring. I assume, we all know that there are pros and cons to freelancing versus studio work. So maybe I'll throw this question to Qingyang. What do you think are the highlights of working as a freelancer, and what are the downsides?
Highlights, I think, at least personally for me, is definitely having total control over your schedule. I really like that flexibility aspect. So if I do want to go grocery shopping, in the morning, especially now in the pandemic, that's usually where there's less people, then I can do that. Or if I need to take a nap at 2 in the afternoon, then I don't have to worry about missing meetings and affecting other team members. And then the other part that I personally also really like is having kind of complete ownership over your work. You get to dictate the style that you said, you get to dictate which projects you take on, and you kind of get to choose, what skill sets you want to work on. So I think coming from someone who just really likes to be able to have control, that definitely appeals to me. And of course, obviously being able to work at home, so I can be home with my cat 24/7. But cons are, I think it can definitely get very isolating. I mean, I'm lucky in a sense because I'm definitely an introvert, but I can imagine that if you definitely thrive in a team environment where having people to bounce a lot of ideas off of, it can be quite isolating. And there are workarounds for that. You can join freelancing groups and online kind of work spaces. And then, of course, the other part is because you are your own secretary and your own, kind of janitor and your own artist, you do have to do all aspects of the job. So that goes anywhere from paperwork to marketing to getting clients to making sure people do pay you. And so definitely lots of hats to wear as well.
Yeah, definitely a lot to juggle as a freelancer. How about you, Avesta? I mean, I guess you came into this sort of out of necessity or because of the circumstances. Did you think it was easy for you to transition into this I'm assuming you came out of school directly, essentially, into freelance, or do you find it kind of fell into your personality to be able to work this way?
So it actually wasn't quite out of necessity for me. So I actually started my career at In Vivo Communications, and I worked there for, I think, around 8 months after graduation. And then during the pandemic, I created a COVID infographic that kind of set off my freelance career. And I posted this infographic on Twitter, and it received over 2 million views and got shared by a lot of kind of big names like World Economic Forum. And then my emails just started flooding with like project requests and people wanting to translate this infographic. And I had to say no to all of these very cool sounding opportunities because I had a full-time job in industry. And I continued to work in industry for a while after that, but the more I kind of thought about it, the more I realized that I actually wanted to do freelance more than working in industry, just because I personally felt like I had a lot of ideas that I wanted to explore. And when you are in industry, you're obviously working for someone else, and you have, very strict deadlines you always have to follow. But as a freelancer, you're free to explore these more creative avenues and ideas that you might have as an individual. So, being pretty young and transient in my career at this point, I decided, with the pandemic as well and everyone working at home, it just kind of fit my schedule already and was a safe option. Or I thought it was safe, although I did, go freelance in the middle of a pandemic, which is quite risky. So, I think in industry, you get to work with a lot of really cool tech and, in high budget projects that you don't get as a freelancer. So, that is also something that I miss in industry, having access to the newest HoloLens or things like that. There's no way I as a freelancer could afford that. So that I would also say is, one of the negative sides of being a freelancer. And then, like QC, sorry, I don't want to butcher your name. QC mentioned, the time, being able to make your own schedule, that's probably the biggest plus. And, also the collaborative aspect, just missing out on those team interactions and throwing ideas off each other. I think that's also quite a big negative in terms of freelancing. But ultimately, for me, it was all about creative freedom. And that's what I'm exploring at this point.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely know for attendees out there, there is a big difference between the type of clients you work with, both in studio versus as a freelancer. And I think this is a good segue to one of our first attendee questions. And this is from Stuart Jensen. What's the biggest source of clients for each of you? And he says, is it cold calls, recommendations from past clients or contracts, advertising your services, etc.? Let's throw this back up to Judy, but I think it'd be great if we hear from a bit of from everyone.
Sure, thanks, Stuart. That's a really great question. I would say I get most of it from referrals from clients, as well as from medical illustration colleagues as well, and classmates, and the AMI forum. I don't do a ton of marketing. I don't do a ton of social media, so I would say primarily just off of word of mouth and client referrals.
How about you, Qingyang?
Sure. I've tried them all. I've cold called people, just found a list of people and started calling. And I've also tried those paid directories. And I think for me, I also echo what Judy said. The most powerful form of getting clients is word of mouth. You do one really good job for one person, and then they'll think of you if one of their colleagues needs something. So I think that's also been my biggest source of clients as well. Yeah.
I'm just going to jump in here since I think my experience has been quite different. So for me, majority of my clients came from social media. And I think, that is such a obvious tool to leverage your abilities and share your work. And it can be very hard to tap into the right communities on social media. But I specifically have found, on Twitter and on LinkedIn, where there's a lot of scientific professionals and, doctors and potential clients for this kind of work. If you have some like doctor connections on Twitter and LinkedIn, they see your work, they share it. They have a lot of connections that are also in those same fields. They'll share it. And, it just becomes more of a natural process where they see your work. And then even if they don't have a project they necessarily want you to work on right away, I've gotten people reaching out to me being like, I saw your work months ago and I was waiting for the right time to reach out for you. So I think, leveraging social media is really important.
Vesta, can I ask you a quick follow-up question to that? Am I allowed to ask questions?
Yeah, please go ahead. This is exactly what we're here for.
Which social media platform do you use most often? Do you think you've been most successful with?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of tricky because I find they have their pros and cons and they're good for different things. So I mean, technically, I had the most success on Twitter because that's where my, COVID infographic went viral, because I think the way that the Twitter algorithm works is when people reshare and like it, it's more likely that their connections are going to see it compared to something like Instagram, where I find it's very hard for something to get that level of virality on Instagram. But I personally use Instagram the most consistently just because, it is a visually targeted platform. And obviously for people like us who do visuals, it makes the most sense to have that kind of nice visual layout. And then LinkedIn, I find, is where I get the most kind of organic interactions or more professional. So if I post something, not just my visual work, but more so career related, like I'm doing a talk at this thing and this is why I'm doing it because I'm passionate about blah, 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 people respond to that better on LinkedIn than Instagram or Twitter. So it's a hard balance, and you kind of you figure it out the more you use them. I'm still figuring it out myself. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and that was a really great synopsis of the pros and cons of these different platforms, and I definitely want to try them out myself as well.
Nice.
Yeah, there's a lot of insights there. And I think, Avesta, you sort of answered this next question that I want to ask from Chelsea, and that is, how much time do you devote?
Just wanted to give Sarah a chance to answer the question because she hasn't been able to answer it yet.
Yes, Sarah, do you want to say anything?
Thank you. Yeah, sure. Just to add, I hope my audio is coming through okay. Just to add that, I mean, a lot of my work has ended up being in a bit of a middle ground of like contract work for other companies. And Tadayoki was talking yesterday a bit about exploring other avenues, sort of adjacent avenues that you might not think of otherwise. So that's been a big generator of some projects for me, sort of helping out companies that do adjacent work, or exploring quite small companies that are related to our field, but are not the biggest in the industry. Yeah.
So actually, maybe now my thoughts are going everywhere, but maybe to jump back to Chelsea's question first, how much time do we spend on marketing, and how much do you spend on, how much of it is social media? What other channels and avenues do you guys use as well? So, I mean, because this all ties into like, finding work and finding the right type of clients. And I think Avesta, you had, like I said, you had a lot of insights there already, how you're kind of navigating these different spaces. I would be curious to see how everyone else handles that. Maybe let's go with Qingyang for this one.
Sure. So how much time do you devote to marketing yourself? I always tell myself, if you're not working, then you should be working to find work. So if you think about like an 8-hour day, and if you've spent, say, 6 of those hours working on a project, then your other 2 hours should be focused on finding work. Of course, depending on if you do have things lined up, then you also don't want to kind of overwhelm yourself. But I think that's generally my philosophy. And personally for me, I feel like a dinosaur because social media is really hard for me. Like I've personally downloaded Snapchat twice, opened it and closed it and deleted it right after. So it's definitely a learning curve for me. So I actually am not that active on social media. And for me, I kind of have just been really fortunate in that usually work kind of finds me because of the strong referral network that I do have. So perhaps maybe someone like Avesta would be a lot better suited to answer the other half of that question.
Well, I already ranted a little bit about social media, so I'll let the other two of you answer first, and then if you want me to tap in again, let me know.
Yeah, as for how much time I spend on marketing, I would say it really depends. It kind of cycles throughout the year since I do balance freelance with full-time work. I do work a lot in the pharma space, so it also depends. Like pre-COVID, there's kind of like a conference season in the fall, and I used to attend a lot of those in person, and of course now they're all virtual. So I would say it really kind of depends like what's going on at the time of year and how much time I have just on my own schedule. But I really love what QC said, about if you're not working, you should be looking for work. And I definitely try and keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, echoing what's already been said, but it's been an interesting journey for me to figure out how to best share things on social media. Back when I was doing more editorial illustration, I found that the turnaround was quite fast, and so I would have a lot of work to show and talk about really quickly. But I find a lot of projects I work on now, especially animation, they're much longer term, and sometimes not as shareable. So, you know, you want to have something visually interesting to show people, but sometimes I find it a bit hard to hit the right note with a bite-sized visual to be sharing frequently. So something I'm still figuring out myself.
So I'd be curious to ask, and this is actually also a follow-up from Chelsea, did any of you guys take any courses on social media marketing? Or if you did, any recommendation, or was this something that you just kind of had to build the habit yourself? Maybe starting with you, Avesta. Oh, Avesta, you're still on mute.
Sorry. I personally have never done any formal training on social media. It's more something that I learned from observation. Like if I posted a certain thing with a certain caption or something, then I noticed maybe I got more interactions than other things. So the more you post, the more you pick up on these patterns. And also depending on what platform you're on, they usually have insights as well, where you can see like engagements with different kinds of posts. And then, you know, for example, something I noticed is that people always want to see process work. They want to know how you did what you did. And those kind of posts always garner way more attention. So for me, it's been more just, you know, being aware. And I'm sorry if you can hear scratching. My cat is trying to get in my room. But yeah, it's just observation for me, and, you know, picking up on those trends. And I think also stepping back, and instead of thinking, how am I marketing myself, think about yourself as a consumer. And when you're on social media, what catches your own attention? You know, they're just humans like you. So often something that you are interested in and that you like is something that other people are going to like. So try and mimic those things that you personally find engaging and interesting.
I think that's really good advice. Thank you. So this is I think chat really wants to know the answer to this one. What are your strategies for negotiating prices with your clients? And this is from Qingyang Chen. This is the big question. Maybe we will start with Judy for this one, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Yes, thanks for asking. That's a fantastic question. I've been in a position where I'm not only freelancing, but I've also hired freelancers and manage a freelance team as well. And so I think the single most thing that I see is people who actually undersell themselves. And so I think it's important that when you decide to embark on a freelance path to really reach out or see what the going rates are, what other people are doing, find other people who have done it previously. I think the AMI has a really helpful guideline in place as well. Since I work in the US, I would say the ranges really depend on academia versus industry, and I don't know if this is different across Canada. So I would say just find out from other people, first of all, what they've done in the past, and also you can always ask a client, I'd really love to help you meet your needs, but what's your budget, or what kind of ranges do you feel comfortable with if you've worked with other people in the past? And then if you kind of get just like a cold call or a cold request, which sometimes happens, if you just have no really negotiation or introduction with them, you can always just say, these are my typical rates, but I'm always negotiable and flexible, and present it that way. So those are just some strategies that I've used in the past.
Anyone else have a take on this? Maybe Sarah?
Yeah, Judy covered a lot of great stuff there. Something that I've found really helpful is talking with the BMC community as well. Like even with getting clients as well, I've found people are just so obviously supportive in our network, and reaching out and seeing what people can help you with. We're all kind of a team here. And I remember, back in school, someone said that we were all each other's competitors, and there's some truth in that, but I see us more as, we all we're passionate about this work and we all want to get it out there and help each other just explore new directions. And that's what I've found talking with my colleagues. They've been a huge help.
I just want to jump in on and add to that. But yeah, I think that's a really important point to bring up, is that you know, the BMC community, and I think the medical illustration community as a whole, is so supportive of each other because we're such a niche field and we're all in it because we're passionate about education and creating these like awesome visualizations. So I've personally never really felt like it was a competition. It's more so a big collaboration. There is enough work for all of the medical illustrators. Like there's a lot of work out there. It's just hard to find it sometimes. So yeah, for me, for example, if I have too many project requests and I can't take them on, I will happily give it to one of my friends who does freelance because, you know, we work together as a team. And I think it's important to remember that.
I agree with what everybody said. And I just wanted to add that I think as a freelancer, you should always quote what you're worth. And if you're like me, quote what you think you're worth and then add another 50% on top of that, because you're probably usually underselling yourself. And I really like this quote that Catherine Adams, who taught the kind of business ethics course when I was at BMC, that if you do want to freelance, you have to stop being 100-aires, because if you you know, take on projects that are $100-$200, then you've got to do the math and think about the salary you have to live, and then that's just way too many projects to feasibly do. So you do want to aim high, and also because once you get one client that really likes you, more often than not, they will be recurring clients. And so if you do underquote once, it's very, very hard to raise that price on them again. So you also have to think about if this client is going to come back to me, say 2-3 times a year, will I still be happy working for a fee that is probably not as high as it should be? So always aim high, and you can always negotiate down, but it's very, very hard to negotiate back up.
Very important lesson, something I wish I knew before I started as well, or it's something I took to heart rather, because we're all told about it, but we don't necessarily practice it. The next question I want to pose you guys is a bit of a mashup of two people's questions. One is from Cassie and the other is from Stuart, and it's about time management. Like, how do you balance freelance with full-time jobs, or rather, how many freelance projects are you able to take on, and how does that affect how you maintain client relationships between projects and moving forward? Maybe Judy, would you like to go with this one first?
Sure, that's a great question as well. I think it really depends on what's going on. Sometimes I have more time and sometimes I have less time. So when an opportunity comes in, I really do a lot of planning in advance to see if it's feasible for me to balance with, say, a full-time job or other obligations that I might have. And if for whatever reason I can't, you know, there's also opportunities to collaborate with other colleagues. And if I, for some reason, feel I absolutely can't, I make sure that I provide a referral and that the client is taken care of, you know, by somebody or in some way. You know, I make sure to kind of maintain that relationship or check back in with them after a couple months to make sure that they've gotten what they needed as well.
Anyone else, Sarah, or?
Yeah. I don't have a full-time job right now. Like, I'm just, if we're still on that point, but I still find it really hard to manage exactly how much time I have for stuff. I think burnout is super common in our industry and lots of industries, and freelancing, I find it's really easy to be hard on yourself or like not taking on enough, not working hard enough. And also just because, you know, I'm still trying to discover exactly what that capacity is. So I think it's really important to think about it, but I certainly don't have the answers. It's really hard.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just chime in as well. So I did do some freelance back when I was working full-time as well. And it's definitely really hard to manage. Like, I would say maximum one project at a time outside of full-time work if you're trying to do freelance on top of full-time. And then since being fully freelance, I initially, when I first started, I was a little bit overzealous and took on every project. And there was a time where I was working on like over 10 projects at once. And I highly recommend against that. It is not sustainable. You're just, shifting your mental gears so often in one day that it's just very tiring, and you're not as productive in a working block as you are when you're just working on 1 to 3 projects at a given time. But with that being said, I think it is also important to have at least 2 projects going, just because if one ends, you have something to keep income. Where if you just have one project and it ends, then you have to look for more work. So I always have like a couple going at once. So then, it keeps the work treadmill going in that sense. And it's just kind of something you refine and learn over time in terms of how to manage that. And your clients are humans. If you just talk to them, if your time is you don't think you can get something when you initially told them you can, be straight up with them. Don't not tell them to the last minute. Like when you see it a week in advance, like let them know. I just treat them like other humans and try and be real with them. And I'm all about transparency. So I think if you are transparent, that will show through and they'll respect that.
Mm-hmm. That's very wise. Chan, do you have anything to add? Otherwise, I would like to jump to one last question before we end the session.
Oh, no, I've got nothing to add. Everybody, I think, said everything I would have said.
Okay, so we do have a question that's highly upvoted, and I think we only have time for this one last one. This is from Colleen. So she says, a semi-less fun question, but how do you find doing taxes as a freelancer in general? Do you do them by yourself, or would you advocate for acquiring help? I had some hiring tax experiences, having done both FT and contract work within the last tax year. Any insights into Canadian, US, or international experience would be of interest. So this is a big one. I know, Judy, you say you're working from the States. Maybe you can start.
I do, yes. This is a great question, and my clients have been across Canada and Europe as well. So my taxes are a bit of a mess, to be honest. And I like to hire somebody. I just literally keep documentation and records and have all the forms, and I just hand it off. It's not something that I want to deal with myself. So thankfully I found some good help with that. But yeah, it's definitely, I'd be very interested in hearing the other panelists, because it's definitely been something that I've been working on as well.
I can jump in quickly. Sorry. Oh, no. Qingyang, you were gonna.
Oh, yeah, mine is super short. Taxes scare the shit out of me, and I do not like math and numbers. So I hired an accountant who handles everything. And I thought accountants would be way out of my price range, but you can actually find accountants that work kind of specifically with small businesses, and godsend. So my advice is find someone to do it for you if you don't want to deal with it.
If there's so this past year was my first time, and I did it myself, and I was very scared. And I definitely had some trusted family and friends help me look it over. Not that they freelance, but just having other eyes on it really helped. I honestly found the biggest kind of mind block for me was because I had registered as a business, I had GST to deal with. I think it made it feel a lot bigger than it was. And I don't know if that's much advice, but feel free to reach out to me if I can help at all with doing that. But I've also heard some great advice before of hiring someone for your first year, someone who doesn't mind also walking you through the process, and then you can take it over subsequent years, just so that you feel comfortable your first tax year.
Just to give my opinion, since it's very different than all 3 of you, since this is my first year freelancing, I haven't actually done freelance taxes yet. So this is a good question for me too. But, in terms of what I am planning on doing, so I use QuickBooks specifically I don't use the sole proprietorship version. I use the one for businesses, because you can do multiple currencies and other stuff you can't do with just the sole proprietor one. And within QuickBooks, you can hire an accountant who will look at all your stuff, and they're like QuickBooks certified. And in QuickBooks too, it automatically tracks all your GST, HST information. So, you know, obviously for me, because I'm Canadian, if I have a Canadian client, I will charge them Canadian taxes, but I don't charge tax to American clients. And it records all of those taxes. It records the taxes I spend on business purchases, and it subtracts that automatically from the taxes I collect on projects. So having a tool like QuickBooks that also does all that stuff for you, I think is, you know, really helpful. And when taxes come around, I'm going to hire an accountant to look over everything for me because I don't trust myself. So I think hiring someone is definitely a good point.
I can recommend you a great accountant, Avesto, for when you need it. She, like Sarah said, walked me through everything and puts up with me asking a million times what terms are. And if you ever incorporate, you will have to hire an accountant to file your annual report anyway.
Yeah, I'll be in touch.
All right, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Unfortunately, we are way over time, but I think everyone had so many interesting questions to ask, and you guys had so many good answers. So to cap things off, thank you again so much to all of you panelists for your wisdom, your honesty. I know everyone will have found something useful from and some useful lessons from all your insights. But unfortunately, the session is coming to an end. So thank you again, Qingyang Chen, Judy Rubin, Sarah Crawley, and Avesta Rastan. Everyone, please give them a huge virtual round of applause.